And Sam will be our co-host and is our tech person. So I want to thank her in advance for setting things up, as well as some of the other people in the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub who have helped with the organization. So I'd like to introduce the panel, and then followed with a Q&A session number 1. And so that will be about 25 minutes. We'll do a really quick poll question and then a Q&A session 2, and that will be about another 20 minutes. And then a last poll question, and then closing remarks and thank yous. So introducing the panel. So we have a distinguished group. First of all, Jamie Rose, who works in the engineering department at the City of Nanaimo, and he is our transportation manager. We also have Colin Stein as the executive director of the BC Cycling Coalition. And also to round out our panel, we have Aaron Hemmons, a cyclist and one of our City of Nanaimo councillors. So welcome to the panel. So we're going to, I will do a screen share right now, and I have the questions that were given to the panel ahead of time. So I'm just going to bring up, oops, I have to do, first of all, I have to go with screen share, right? Okay. So as I said, there were the, so everyone can see the screen as, okay, wonderful. So as we all know, the name of this presentation or gathering is All You Wanted to Know About Cycling and Infrastructure, but ran out of time to ask. And it is being hosted by the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub. And it's a follow-up from the meeting we had in April 6th. So the first theme that the questions seemed to show was a concern or questions about bicycle racks and the safety of bike parking. So for the first, let me see, I've got, so I'm just trying to, there we go. Okay, so the first question is, for shopping excursions, there are concerns about taking one's bike because people are concerns about taking one's bike because people don't know if it will be there when they get back. So we're interested in the quality and quantity of safe places to lock up a bike, and that's an issue in Nanaimo. So what is planned in the city in the near future? And then we'll take over. We'll talk about the other 3 questions in a later portion. So perhaps I could call upon Jamie to start this one off.
Sure. So I think for the recent history, we've really been focusing on trying to build out the network and fill in the gaps to give people the comfortable facilities to navigate on. We're now that some of our corridors are actually achieving maybe not completion, but a more substantial state, we are having to sort of turn our attention to the first mile, last mile amenities, whether it's the lockup or sort of tool stands or things like that. And so it's still fairly early for our process, but talking about these facilities as part of some of our bigger projects has definitely become part of the conversation. And so another scenario, or another I suppose opportunity that we've been trying to explore is a way to set up some sort of a process to
our favorite team,
encourage retailers to also step up their end of trip facilities. We do have some language in our off-street parking bylaw that speaks to requirements for bike lockups. Unfortunately, that's just for new builds. So, trying to find a way to retrofit is a bit of a challenge, but you know, it's in line with our sort of exploratory on ways to help property owners retrofit a building for an EV charging station as well. So it's still a little bit early to sort of say we've got this plan or that, but it's something that we are trying to build or develop a strategy for.
Are there incentives that are coming through the province at all for things other than the bylaw, which misses renovations and that sort of thing? Is there anything that incentivizes businesses to put a bike rack in front of their business?
Not formally at this point in time. What we are looking at is sort of developing a grant program where businesses could receive some supplemental funding to assist with an installation. We haven't we have some money set aside. We just need to set up a program and a process for people to apply for it, and then for us to prioritize the distribution.
Shelley, if I may,
Yes, Colin.
if you don't mind, like now and then, of course, I don't know very much at all about Nanaimo, but at times, like Jamie just touched on something that relates to what we see coming out of the province. You mentioned the province and the active transportation infrastructure grants, which people may have heard of. It's the annual grant, used to be called BikeBC, that municipalities and regional districts apply for, and some other types of groups can apply for as well. But usually what you hear about are intersections, signals, like actual infrastructure on the ground stuff. Those are larger and more expensive, and they can be tough to get and tough to get the matching funds for. The least expensive grants that I've seen awarded, actually most recently last year, one of them was for bike parking in Revelstoke. So what Revelstoke did was they got a grant for, I think, $7,500 for a number, I don't know how many, but for a number of bike racks. So where Nanaimo and Jamie and his team are working you know, hard and diligently and all the time on the big stuff, sometimes those little items, those, you know, it still takes effort to put together a grant application, but sometimes the province has money for just this type of thing, which is, of course, almost as important as the actual stuff on the ground. So something to look into.
Thanks, Colin. Who would be writing up such a grant? Would it be an advocacy group approaching the city, or would an advocacy group such as if it were or a business or something like that, would they be off applying for this grant?
Well, I don't think so. So Jamie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe while it's not exclusive, almost every active transportation grant, and there's both infrastructure and also now network planning. So the province is doing both kinds, but I believe it's almost exclusively local, regional governments, and then First Nations and Indigenous. However, if it's not this particular grant, there are sometimes others that advocacy groups can apply for. And in any circumstance, I would say that, again, while Jamie and the team and the whole city office, you know, all the departments have their plans for those large grant applications as they come up. I'm assuming, and again, Jamie, tell me if I'm wrong, that it's always good to hear from the community what they want to see, and if it's feasible and reasonable alongside the larger projects, that you might entertain like that type of thing.
Yeah, so I think every grant that I've seen come across in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe I'm speaking a little bit too confidently here, but I can't think of one that was open to, for lack of a better term, non-government agencies. There are many of them that have an opportunity to include letters of endorsement from advocacy groups, and so we have in the past used different groups. In fact, I think, Colin, we might have even asked for a letter of support from BC.
And that happens a lot. And you know what? And even if there was something that was open to an advocacy group that wasn't related to planning, related to infrastructure, we don't have the right of way. We don't own the land, so it really is over to the government.
Yeah, it is really fundamental in being able to put something on the ground. As Colin mentioned, there are some grants that are open to sort of planning strategies. but one of the sort of criteria that many of these grants have is size of municipality, you know, whether it's under a population of 10,000, I think 10 to 50, 50 to 300, and then over 300 or something like that. And then the magnitude of the grants sort of correspond to those. And the planning ones tend to be on the smaller end of the spectrum. So it's from all of the grants that I've seen come through recently, and there's been quite a few that we've reviewed. We do have staff that sort of are on mail out lists to hear about anything that comes available, and so we quite often get probably every 2 weeks to a month get a list of all the new grants that have opened up, and sort of, you know, test them to see if it's something that we have an opportunity to apply for. But many of them are ones that we try and encapsulate all facets of active transportation. So whether it's biking or walking or end of trip facilities for biking. I have heard that the grants are evolving to also include transit amenities. So there really is sort of a expansion that's being pursued. So.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Lots of good information about grants and opportunities to work with government and NGOs. So for the other 3 questions, just those are probably very short answers. Does the Downtown Business Association support biking parking downtown? And there were 2 concerns about bike racks, not enough in city parks and facilities, and Woodgrove Bus Depot. So when you're taking the bus somewhere, that's a really important thing if you're getting there by bike, and then it's really, there isn't any place safe to leave a bike, especially an e-bike. And then the concern about Woodgrove and the Country Club reducing their bike racks. Take on any of those?
Sure, why not? So the Downtown BIA is actually a fairly new entity. It was previously sort of a couple of different groups, and so to be honest, I haven't really had a chance to directly ask the question, yay or nay. I have been working with, they're having some conversations with a couple of the businesses, sort of I think it was more through the Old City Quarter about finding opportunities to provide some sort of a bike lockup or a bike parking area. And to be honest, I think the ball's in my court right now to find some hardware that would be appropriate. We've identified a couple of different locations that I think would be pretty good spots, but that's just a conversation at this point, and I don't think I could speak quite so broadly to the position of the BIA.
Right.
Hey, can I jump in on that one?
And panelists, please do jump in when you feel.
So yeah, quickly. So the new Downtown BIA has only met, I think, 3 times, but I do know, I was speaking with Kim Smythe from the Chamber last week, and I know they're looking for quick wins. So ways to really quickly establish themselves in the downtown. And I imagine that end of trip facilities might be an easy way to do that. So I would imagine this is on their radar, but it's a brand new organization. And if they go in that direction, it'll probably take them a bit.
Okay, all right. Any thoughts on the removal of some of the bike racks? Were they damaged, or does anyone know why those were not?
At Woodgrove and Country Club?
Yeah.
Things like this that are on private property, we don't really have a huge amount of involvement in, and that statement applies to the Woodgrove Transit Exchange as well. I don't actually know the explicit details of the agreement or the lease agreement between the RDN and Woodgrove, so I'm not sure who sort of addresses sort of those end of trip facilities, but
okay, all right.
Yeah.
So
Shelley, can I jump in here and just share, and thank you to Jamie, Colin, and Aaron for these answers. We do have a couple of questions that have popped up in the chat that I'd just like to share in case the speakers haven't had a chance to see. So Greg asks if there's anyone, or if the city or anyone is looking at incentivizing covered bike parking, just sharing that in the winter, that's the most practical type of bike parking.
I will take that, and I'll just reinforce Jamie's earlier message that at every council meeting where we talk about active transportation, we talk about end of trip facilities. But to date, we've really mobilized resources around the actual infrastructure, the cycling infrastructure. So it's on our radar, but it just hasn't, it hasn't been the priority to date. Yeah, and Jamie, anything you want to add on that, obviously?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's we've been really sort of had our sights set on building out the network, and you know, there's been a couple of maybe not council meetings, but engagement processes regarding transportation projects, and you know, the conclusion is that we've done that. We're pretty good at making things black and gray, but we don't really get the finishing touches quite right. So we're sort of broadening our vision and bringing some more key players to the team to make sure we get those end of trip and placemaking amenities really top notch for when we do our projects. So
Okay, so something to look for in the future.
absolutely.
Great. All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
All
The
right.
next question from Maita was that the city is working on a program called Partners in Community with Neighborhood Associations, and that bike racks in a neighborhood might be a way for communities to apply to the city for grants, which might be attached to provincial funding. I'm wondering if anyone has thoughts on that for Maita.
Yeah, this is a super exciting program that council is looking to implement. It hasn't been implemented yet, but basically it's building on a successful Partners in Parks program where neighborhoods will adopt a park, but looking at more from a community development lens and what can neighborhoods do to create or to break down isolation, et cetera. So a really exciting program to come, and I think Maida's probably right. There's going to be lots of opportunities for the neighborhoods to decide how they want to use that funding if they apply for it. And I do just want to note, and this might be totally out of left field, Jamie, you would probably know, but the Nanaimo Foundation provides $500 grants to neighborhoods working on community development. And I wonder if a bike rack could be welded for $500. Is that a reasonable amenity for a neighborhood to apply for $500 for the Nanaimo Foundation Fund?
I think the short answer is yes. Long answer is it might not be very big.
Right. Fair.
It might only be like a two stall bike rack or something. I haven't anything I've had to have fabricated lately is definitely on the high end of the dollar value. There was also, and I haven't so much lost track of it. I just haven't had time to sort of get back to it. And it may sort of be an opportunity for an expansion of the parks program, but there's a program that the city of Victoria does, and we sort of did a bit of digging on it last summer, and I can't remember all the details of it, but it's a similar process to the Partners in Parks, but it's actually meant for like streets and public space enhancement, where a community could apply, and the city has a structure to sort of provide some funding and connect a neighborhood with either a city staff or a consultant that might be able to identify some opportunities to sort of add some amenities to a neighborhood, you know, whether it's a bike rack or a bench or a garden or some green space, something like that. So you know, that is also something that's sort of on the back burner, but we would like to try and activate at some point.
Okay. Thank you.
We have, Sam, did you have one more, or?
There is another one here from Dawn, and Dawn did share
Okay.
a link in chat for anyone who wishes about a grant program offered, I believe that's federally. And then Dawn also is asking, could RDN transit agreements with places like Woodgrove include bike rack requirements?
I'm sorry, I only caught a portion of that. Could RDN grants
transit agreements within the RDN or with the RDN and places like Woodgrove include bike rack requirements?
So again, the short answer is yes. Long answer is a little more complicated. The way the relationship between the RDN and the city is with respect to bus stop amenities, at the exchanges, so Woodgrove and downtown, and just in a slightly more awkward fashion, Uplands and Country Club, the RDN actually manages and operates and maintains the bus shelters and garbage receptacles and all of that sort of stuff. So it's sort of in their court to include the facilities that are sort of asked of them. Outside of that, every other bus stop is maintained and operated by the city. And so coming full circle, we actually would be the ones that would be introducing either recycling bins or garbage receptacles or benches or bike racks at all of those other stops. So you know, we've already got some conversations going on just to sort out how and where we want to prioritize bus shelters. So we would include, you know, the aspiration is to take a more holistic look at it and look at shelters and cycling lockups and securing devices and things like that. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And perhaps last question, and then we can move on because I know, Shelley, you've got lots of themes here. But I do think it's also important for us to address the questions that are being brought up by the people that are here. Maita has a question. Are bike racks considered a possible amenity in the development process?
That's such a good question, and I don't know the specific answer. I'm kind of curious, Jamie. What I see from a council standpoint is that most of our developers choose to put their amenity contributions towards a lot of housing. We see money going into our housing legacy reserve, and public art seems to be another big one. But Jamie, I've never seen bike racks named as an amenity.
So probably not. But so as I said, the off-street parking bylaw. So that's the bylaw that actually regulates how many parking stalls need to be associated with a development, whether it's retail or residential. Does have language in it that speaks to end of trip facilities for cycling. Admittedly, the bylaw is not that old. But it's at its time of adoption, we felt that we'd sort of raised the bar as high as the community would support. I've had some conversations with our planning teams that run or that oversee that bylaw, and I think it's time. It's been short, but I think it's time to go back and revisit it because I think there's a much bigger appetite to do more. And so I think that's sort of our big lever to pull to get more and more end of trip facilities. I think that if it's depending on the form of the development, there's probably some just good practices to include either cycling lockups or, I mean, usually it's a fairly simplistic bike rack, but we don't tend to see more than that. And as for amenity contributions, as Councillor Hammond said, it's typically our big focus items such as the housing and community art. So.
All right, perhaps we can move on. I'm getting the distinct, the distinct idea that we're going to run out of time again. Anyway, let's sort of go through. The second theme is citizen advocacy for cycling and supporting decision makers. So one question was on basically, are you looking for more data? And what kind of data can us citizens contribute. How can we contribute? Are there committees that the city has that we can have a delegation or some other way of showing what we know best about our bike routes and others? Also about e-bikes. How can we advocate more for e-bikes at city, provincial, and citizen level? And also how to get our young people involved and how can we as citizens and as municipal and provincial advocates help to get them into a cycling culture. So anyone want to jump in to talk about that?
Maybe I'll dive in and just try and do a one and done through a couple of those themes and then leave it over to those who know best in Nanaimo. But I would suggest for Strava, while there's absolutely no issue and it's a great tool, it's fun to use, it will, and despite the fact that there is a business application called Strava Metro that perhaps Jamie or perhaps others in City Hall use to understand at a mass level what the trends are over time, like months and years at a time, and you do comparisons, you're only really capturing those people who use Strava. So historically, that has often been those who are into cycling for fitness, for recreation, for achieving personal bests, as opposed to for everyday commuting. Now, I'm not suggesting it's not used by more people, but the data is going to help Strava. It's not necessarily going to be something that helps for local cycling infrastructure development. So one of the best things you can do is help the groups that are either local or provincial that are themselves already using tools to generate data, as well as to encourage and engage people and get more cycling happening. But those local and provincial groups that are already gathering data where they need more participation at the local level. So one might be, for example, bikemaps.org, developed out of the city of University of Victoria. It's a born in BC international tool, but what it's focused on specifically is issues, near misses, crashes, falls, hazards of any kind. There's a team of people at UVic and working with bikemaps.org across the province that feed that information and work with local municipalities often, but they actually work with local advocacy groups as well. The other one would be GoByBike. This is Go by Bike Week. And so you have the provincial organization, you have the one out of Vancouver and in Victoria. There's 3 organizations encouraging people to log their rides, to use a tool that feeds data into a system that is captured and then fed to the province so they can see how the numbers are changing and I think growing over the years. So, if you can focus on supporting local tools, I think that's best for encouraging local development. I think in terms of the next 2 questions, how can citizens participate? Is there a committee? Definitely this is about, if there's not an advocacy group already formalized, if there's a way for citizens who are activated, who want to provide feedback to the city, and this is for people like Aaron, as well as people like Jamie, whether it's a committee of council or a citizen-led casual committee, or sorry, that was my phone on speaker, or there's a way for just a local group to meet collectively and then feed information and request and write letters to staff and to council. That's the best way to get things happening. Just, old school letters as well as emails, sometimes direct messages over social media. But, if you can formalize and explain what your request and what your desire is for the city, get those to the decision makers, because they're looking for feedback from citizens. And then lastly, in terms of, e-bikes taking off and how to capitalize on that, as well as how to encourage people, young people, to get involved. This is again where I think you need a local group, whether affiliated with City Hall or not, whether it's its own organization for the city or for the regional district. It's about getting to people. Of course, now it's only slightly starting to get reasonable to collect, to collect together face to face and to have a meeting. But whether it's demonstrating the ease and putting on like a live demonstration of e-bikes, getting people together to understand how they work and to get on them, or getting together to meet with student groups that are interested in making transportation better at local schools, at colleges, universities nearby. I think a video is a great idea, but there's about 100 views of that video, and that's no slagging that video or the authors of it. It's about the fact that the more people you can get together from diverse groups to share their experiences and their needs creates greater noise, for lack of a better term, but also the ability to then get noticed and listened to by the decision makers who find it hard to deal with every single one person in Nanaimo, but a larger group of people that have common concerns and interests, that has power and influence, for lack of a better term. and that's what sometimes gets listened to. So the more that you can encourage people with common interest to get together and to talk and to meet and to brainstorm all these issues is the best way to get started.
Thank you, Colin. Erin or Jamie, would you like to say a few words about this? And then we'll probably have to move on to the next.
I think I'll just jump in on one point. Sorry, Jamie, to interrupt you. Good comments, Colin, and I would also add in terms of how citizens can be engaged and is there a committee and how do we identify potential routes? Just a reminder that the city has it actually all mapped. We kind of have a really good idea of where we need to go and what our next steps are. And so for me, it's about resourcing that. It's not that these bike routes are unknown or that the points of disconnection are unknown. It's that these infrastructure projects take time. And so I completely agree. People need to always be vocal, but do so, if I may ask, in the context of knowing that these plans exist and they're good and they've been created with deep community consultation. I'm pretty sure the Greater Nanaimo Cycling Coalition was deeply involved in the development of the Transportation Master Plan. Jamie, you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but just a reminder that we aren't starting at zero. We have some really good transportation data about where we want to go, and the question right now is resourcing it, from my perspective.
Thank you, Erin. Jamie, did you have a last few comments?
A couple of quick things. I think
Okay.
Colin and Councillor Emmons have captured most of it. We do actually have a Strava Metro account. So we actually are able to see Strava usage throughout the city, I think as far back as 2018. And so it is a good indicator, but as Colin stated, it is only those people who are self-selecting. So it's better than nothing, but it's not comprehensive by any means. So right now, based on some feedback and some discussions that we actually had with the city of Seattle, we are sort of basically building out a data proofing system. So as you know, in addition to looking at end of trip facilities, we're also looking at including data collection hardware on all of our new big cycling projects. So like Metro Drive, I believe we're even doing it on Front Street, so that we can actually develop some correction factors between Strava and these specific corridors, so that we can have an even better idea of how many people are actually using them. So in short, you know, if you're a user, that's fantastic. If you encourage people to use it, that's even better. And so, yeah, and then there are other, you know, bikemaps.org, I think is the one it is. I think that's the one I've seen. There's also Trailforks. There's a number of different platforms that can be used to document usage. It's not quite as easy for us to have access to the data, but it is there. And there's even the whole conversation around big data. And that's just, you know, basically that's any cell phone or activity tracker. It generates data, and there's contractors out there that will scrub it, sort of depersonalize it, and just sell the raw information. And so that's another avenue that we're looking at. So I'm just trying to think what the other ones were. Advocacy, I think Councillor Hammond's mailed that one. I'm sorry if I missed it, but also, you know, get involved in Nanaimo, the whole reimagine process.
Mm-hmm.
That's underway right now. It's a great opportunity. You know, as indicated, like the Transportation Master Plan was not sort of a wing and a prayer process. That was almost a 2-year process to gather information, engage the community, and really sort of strategically consider what would be the sort of most appropriate way to move forward with our cycling infrastructure. You know, and I think I've had this conversation with people before. at first blush, it does look a little haphazard, but when you actually start to see it and sort of see it in like a 5-year, 7-year time frame, there is a bit of a method to the madness. And you know, in all honesty, up until about 3 years ago, our investments in our cycling infrastructure have been pretty modest. And I think that we're really sort of gaining momentum right now. But again, as Councillor said, there's only so many players in the team right now, and we're all going full tilt. So you know, we would love to be able to put more out there, but it's just a function of not quite having a big enough workflow pipe. So
Okay. All right.
If I could jump in with just a couple of questions from the chat.
Okay.
And,
And we'll move on. Yeah.
Maybe this
We'll have
kind
to
of
move on.
relates to Jamie, what you were just talking about, you know, it's going to take a bit of time, but one of the questions comes from Brenda, and just she's asking if any of the newly proposed bike routes have been completed. There, in addition, there's a question about perhaps gathering data by giving people who cycle a tax break, and wondering if the city's considered that option.
So first part of that, we do have quite a few cycling routes that have sort of achieved their envisioned completion. The Pine Bruce corridor has basically got a bike lane from Comox Road south to 8th Street, I think it is now, and then a protected shoulder in the northbound direction. Not entirely up to our current standards, but that was conceived 8 years ago, I think. So 4th Street is coming together. I think our most sort of flagship, obviously, is Metro. And if anybody's been out there recently, the first half of the first phase, so I guess the first quarter of it is looking really, really good. And the first phase will be wrapping up in I think it's the end of the month now. Yeah, end of June, early July. And so that'll be the extension of the ENN through to just, you know, meters short of Turner Road. And then phase 2 should be getting started just as that's finishing up, and we'll be wrapping up probably about this time next year. And then that'll take us all the way to Woodgrove. If anybody's taken Front Street lately, we've got a bunch of blue markings on brand new pavement. And so that's probably going to be substantially complete within a couple of weeks, I would say. I think those are probably really our sort of highest profile projects right now. We've got a handful of other ones that are just starting to build some momentum. I think, well, actually there's one other one that is sort of an upgrade of an existing system, and that's the trail through Bowen Park. I don't know if anybody else has used it at any point in their time, but it used to be a walking route for me. And concurrent with some sanitary sewer upgrades, we're actually widening it out and illuminating it. So it'll be an all-season connection through Bowen Park from the hospital area to downtown and VIU. So
Wonderful. Actually, so Sam, thank you very much, Jamie, for that. That's sort of segued really nicely into the third theme. Sam, was there anything else that was really pertinent that you saw in the chat?
Oh, just the second part of that question. This one came from Judy, and just if the city was considering a tax break for folks who cycle, and as a way to potentially collect data.
Not necessarily tax breaks, but I definitely have had a few weird and wonderful ideas of ways to incentivize people to ride their bikes. I'm sort of debating them back and forth with Mr. Harding, our Parks and Rec leader, but we'll see what we can generate.
I think it's something that has come up at council a few times too, and you know, we have a low flow toilet rebate. The RDN has a water capture rebate. So it seems reasonable that we could offer a rebate for people who are purchasing e-bikes for the first time. And I actually don't know where that last landed. I feel like that was a year ago that we had that conversation, but it's on our radar.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for all those, and good to see that there is some thinking out of the box, things that haven't been tried yet, and encouragement being done. The third theme, and we do have 8 themes, so we're getting almost to 12 minutes to the end of the hour, but we have started in on this theme of connectivity between bike lanes, paths, and the safety therein. So maybe some of the highlights of this, perhaps hills, if you can talk about hills and how how are we dealing with those in terms of getting from A to B, north to west, north to south, and east to west in quite a hilly area. The other part would be people who are shopping, what kind of bike paths can they take, and Vancouver seems to have a fair population of those people, and what are we not doing? Because I've only seen maybe less than a handful of people who do the bike trailer thing here. Hospital was kind of mentioned. One other area was Hammond Bay Road. Is there more involved in that, in the bike lanes and interconnections, perhaps with Rutherford and that sort of thing? And speed limits and slowing traffic. Could anyone like to just, maybe we can limit our comments to about a minute, and then go on to the 4th theme.
A bunch of these, if I can jump in, most of these are technical, and so Jamie's probably the better person to ask. But I do want to note the second from the bottom bullet: a simple seawall design for a walking and biking structure along Departure Bay would be a valuable asset. Indeed, it would. And that is the waterfront walkway that council is looking to, again, resource and may actually come to a ballot, or it might be something to vote for on the ballot in 2022. So it's certainly not simple, but it's definitely something the city's really looking
Carrie.
Hey, Jamie, maybe talking about hills and dealing with that, and then Hammond Bay Road, perhaps.
Technical responses in 60 seconds or less. Okay.
I know.
Hills, we have them. You know, there's only so much rock we can move, but I think what I can sort of probably leave you with is, if there's a way to take people around them, we will. If there's a way, if up and down is the only choice, then we make sure that the facility is suitable for people going up and downhill. You know, more room to go up the hill. You know, if you're leaning and sawing on it, then you need a bit more space. Whereas if you're going downhill and then not quite so much, like space isn't quite as critical.
Mm-hmm.
Hammond Bay Road, well, that kind of captures both of those sentiments. Very hilly, not a lot of space. You know, Hammond Bay Road, let's say between, well, big picture, let's say Rutherford to Departure Bay, it is, there are sections there, maybe narrow it down to Williamson to Departure Bay Road. There are sections there that are just exceedingly costly to build. And, you know, as much as I would like to be able to prioritize some sort of an infill through there, the dollars required per kilometer are so many times more than so many other areas of the city. It really challenges me to sort of take that big lump and put it there when I could actually do 3 or 4 projects somewhere else for the same amount of money. Now that said, we do have we are in the process of funding a project on Hammond Bay between Turner and Rutherford, which is concurrent with a huge sanitary sewer upgrade. But we will be able to sort of reconstruct the road fairly economically to include proper cycling facilities in both directions. And then we actually have a similar situation on Rutherford Road. And by the way, these are a few years out, but they are coming up on Rutherford Road between 19A or also the ENN, and which will enable us to connect up to Uplands Drive. So we'll be able to get people off of the spine, which is the E and N and Metro, and off into our residential neighborhoods up in the north end. I think there was another layer to that question, but I can't remember now.
Looks like Shelley had maybe a bit of technical problems, but Shelley,
I did.
Good to
I was
see you
kicked
back.
off. Yes, thank you. Well, was that my, I was still, because I've taken off my sharing because I thought that that would help.
Can I just address the
Yeah, go ahead.
So regarding what's Vancouver doing, or what has it done right? I would say that it's not Vancouver, it's really Victoria, and it's Vancouver, City of North Vancouver, Richmond, Surrey. So this goes back over the last 40 years. It's been this culture change that's happened truly over a generation. It started in Victoria with, to be honest, advocacy groups championing education in schools and community centers, Bike Month, Bike to Work Week. That was picked up by the Vancouver advocates. They stole it essentially from Victoria. Let's say brought it over to the lower mainland here. And that's how it took hold here in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. Now, not to diminish at all the work of mayors, councils, staff, who actually had to invest the money to make things happen, to whether to implement things or pay the advocacy groups to run the courses in Bike to Work Week, and for them to then build up and sort of be part of that culture. But I would argue that it's this cultural change that can't happen, and Jamie would be the first person to know this, can't happen overnight or in a year or two in a place as large and dense and growing as Nanaimo. However, I would say, and this goes back to the bike parking discussion, as well as the idea that all the best ideas about what makes a transportation network happens within City Hall. I would challenge that notion. I don't think you build a transportation network, say for cars, without including parking. So I think the same holds true for end of trip facilities for cycling, and there's peril. I think investing a lot of money and a lot of time in a cycling and walking network, but especially for cycling, where there isn't some commensurate, some level of end of trip facilities that are baked into it, and as well as for engaging proactively with a group, whether again, coming in and sitting at City Hall or liaising with an external independent advocacy group to actually listen and find out, well, what might have changed since we heard from the relatively strongly male and older demographic of the Greater Nanaimo Cycling Coalition from years past, and what may have changed in the last 3, 5, 10 years, and what are people actually asking for? It's the equivalent of a desire line that cuts across a park, across the grass, that gets worn in over time when people don't want to walk around the sidewalk. It's not that building sidewalks are bad, it's that people want a different direction and they're actually taking a route that's best suited to what their needs are. And I'm not suggesting that people should be trampling grass or that every bike lane that cycling advocates want should be built, but that there's a two-way street to be had here. And it includes, listening to the community, sometimes revisiting plans, moving forward bike parking, I think at a reasonable and maybe faster rate than was otherwise planned, and making that sort of broad cultural approach to cycling a priority, as opposed to saying we build lanes. So that's, I think, the lesson, to be honest, of Vancouver, and that's how it is seen as, even though it's much more broad than Vancouver, but it's seen as the cycling mecca. So is Victoria, and so are these other places largely in the US and other places in Canada that I think are taking that multi-pronged approach. So that's my answer for that.
There is really quickly, there is a question here from Judy that does seem to relate to bike lanes, etc. Judy writes, the new bulges, and she says Waddington, for example, force bikes to merge left into the main busy roadway. Cars are rushing to beat bikes to the bulge. It seems so unsafe for cyclists. How does this fit into helping cyclists get around?
I'd have to check the individual locations, but it's I mean, the crossing at Waddington in particular, I don't know the exact dimensions that were used, but there should be there's also no facilities leading into it, so the assumption would be that the cyclists would be with traffic already. So I don't know if I have an explicit answer to that, other than I'd have to take a look at it and see what the details were. That sort of, once I light the wick, I kind of hand it off to somebody else. So I'll have to take a look and see how much space is actually there, and maybe there needs to be some demarcation of lane lines through it as well. But
Okay. All right. And Sam, is that the completion of questions that they had?
Yes, it is. And thank you, Jamie, for that answer.
Yes, and thank you from me too. I think I'm going to jump ahead to one more that seemed to be have a little bit more meat to it. We only have 2 minutes left. Perhaps you could bear with me and we can go a wee bit over time, maybe 5 minutes, and then we can kind of do our polls and then call it a night. So the 6th theme is education and signage and crossways and shared pathways. So that seems to be something that Colin had talked about, Jamie, and also Aaron, where we are not just focusing in on cycling, it's active transport means. So there were questions about crosswalks. It was the one near Buttertubs Marsh. There was a crosswalk that seemed to include cyclists. Can those kinds of signages at crosswalks be implemented in other situations? Also, seems to be an issue of education. So what is the city doing? What is the province doing in terms of promoting sharing the road and cycling and driving etiquette? Most people are very cooperative, and I'm very happy to report that, but there have been times where things have gone awry, and it's very disconcerting, especially when you're on a bike. Eye contact was a comment that is critical for both the driver and the cyclist, but with tinted windows that can be difficult. And then if we could just make a comment on what the Idaho stop is and whether that's something that might be adopted in Nanaimo or in BC. Anyone want to jump in on that?
I can jump in there. So I think the crosswalks they were speaking of are the ones that include the elephant's feet, which is a marking and signage that enables cyclists to cross in the crosswalk parallel or in sort of in the same space or similar space as pedestrians. And could those be included on other crosswalks? Possibly. One of the key things to those is that they are linked back to a facility that already allows a cyclist to ride on it. So like if it's a trailway like the ENN, or if it's Buttertubs, the Trans-Canada Trail through Hawthorne, or the Marsh, and that's why those were used there. You'll also see them on Bowen at Labio and at Cypress and Terminal, because those are connections from cycling facilities that are integrated with or adjacent pedestrian or integrated with pedestrian facilities. So I guess the short answer is yes, we can do them in more places, but they do need to be used appropriately with the surrounding infrastructure.
And then education, are there any maybe shifts or pushes towards that?
So I think that I think Colin actually said it the best, and it's almost a generational thing, and Victoria, Vancouver, those are communities that have been sort of quite diligently moving forward with active transportation priorities for 30, 40 years. And so right now, so they've seen this sort of cultural shift over that time period, and right now the way we're approaching it is really to get into the school system early and start by getting kids out of cars and onto their bikes or walking or even busing if needed to get to and from school, so they grow up and become less inclined to trend towards personal vehicles for their sort of modes or choice of modes of travel. And so at a provincial and I think probably even a national level, we are seeing a decline in people getting their driver's licenses at 16. many years ago, everybody I knew was waiting in line on their 16th birthday to get their learner's ticket. And that's just not the case anymore. You know, people, whether it's the cost of ownership or the sort of more socially conscious decisions of not wanting to you know, drive a gas GHG producing vehicle, and not having the funds to drive an electric vehicle, there's just not that appetite. And so, like I said, I mean, my aspiration is to sort of start that through the school system, and School District 68 has been fantastic to work with, and you know, we've done a couple of active school travel plans in the last few years. We're starting another one this fall, and are just sort of charting out which schools we're going to chip our way through and just really sort of take it from the ground up.
If I may add one thing, and then
Yes.
again, I apologize, I have to run, but
Yep.
I really do recommend Bike Sense. This precedes
Yeah.
my involvement with the BC Cycling Coalition. It originated in Victoria in the year 2000. We're on our 6th edition currently on the website, the link I put in chat. Currently producing the 7th edition, which is just days, I think, away from going off to print and be updated on the website. And we're going to print 20,000 books, 20,000 hang tags in every bike shop in BC, and that's going to be part of our summer. But it is a generational cultural thing, so it takes everyone to be involved and to be talking inclusively about cycling. And one of the best ways to do that sometimes is to hold back on measures that are too aggressive. I would categorize the Idaho stop or the rolling stop, or stop as yield, which means you're biking, there's a stop sign, but in the two other, at a four-way intersection, at the two other directions, no one going. It would be more trouble and more effort for you to stop and start back up again than to watch, look clearly both ways, and to keep going. That's the law in Washington State. In the last year, stop as yield became the law. It is in a number of states, but again, if you want to enrage people in cars who already have an axe to grind for people on bikes and they just don't get it, they don't feel the love, this tends to inspire a sense of entitlement. Whereas I think there are other measures, such as the slower neighborhood speeds pilot with the Ministry of Transportation, which is actually starting with CRD in a number of municipalities and in Lower Mainland, that sort of thing, as well as, I got to say, our push for safe passing, a 1 meter to 1.5 meter safe passing law. There's a petition that we've started that's got 1,500 plus signatures right now. And this is my last comment, City Council in Vancouver, as well as City of North Vancouver, both councils have written up a resolution for safe passing to go in front of their councils, and if endorsed by their councils, will go to the 2021 UBCM. That's the Union of BC Municipalities Convention in September. And if that's endorsed and approved by the UBCM, then that will be something for the Ministry of Transportation and Municipal Affairs. So three bike riding ministers, Bowen Ma, Rob Fleming, and Josie Osborne, to respond to a resolution asking for safe passing distance. And there's a good information on that petition as well as on our website. And I'm sorry to dominate this last portion. Nope. Now I'm going to run.
Okay, thank you very much, Colin.
Shelley, feel free to share my information with the group here, my email address, my contact, because I'd love to hear any follow-up.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. All your wisdom from past and present and excellent practices are really appreciated.
And thank you and everyone else for the work in Nanaimo that you're doing, and hope to see you in person someday soon.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Good night. Okay, we are actually over time, so it's 8:07 right now. I just wanted to maybe go to the closing part of maybe last a minute maximum of a comment for the vision of cycling in the near future in Nanaimo, maybe from Aaron and from Jamie, and then we'll call it a wrap for tonight. We've had such good discussion, and so many great resources and understandings have come to light. So Aaron, would you like to do a minute wrap up of your vision? What are the really highlight points?
Yeah, I actually wasn't prepared to talk about vision for cycling, but here's what I think I'll say in this 60 seconds I have is that I learned when I joined council that the values of a city are reflected in the budget. So the more that we can allocate resources towards active transportation, the more we're living our values that were expressed to us by the community in the transportation master plan. And allocating those additional resources is something that this council has continually pushed for, and poor Jamie can attest to this. I'm sure like his whole team is probably working 12 hours days and hates us all, but it's something we keep putting the gas on because we know it's important. So what we're trying to do as a council is to flip that narrative of not enough, the kind of this scarcity thinking. We actually have an amazing city for cycling. And council is continuing to invest and invest in new ways and deeper ways, as Jamie can attest. And so I like to share that we're headed in the right direction, and groups and conversations like this are so valuable in reaffirming that this is the direction that people want to go in. So thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Erin. And Jamie, last word to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you know, I mean Councillor Hemmons did a great summary, and to be honest, yeah, we are sprinting, but you know what, it's these are things. I mean, I started working for the city in 2007, and I think we might have had one bike lane at that point, and that was an accidental one. So you know, it's pretty remarkable to see how far we've come and to see how many opportunities we have in the future. You know, the conversations that are going on with Reimagine and Get Involved in Nanaimo are so reaffirming of all of the things that we feel we should be doing, and hearing the community say, yeah, we need to be doing this is amazing. So, you know, we want to keep building out our system. We want to keep working on these end of trip facilities, and, you know, fundamentally, we want to really get people shifting their way of thinking. And you know, I heard somebody describe the analogy of introducing seatbelts and getting kids to sort of lean on their parents about seatbelts, and, you know, don't forget your seatbelt, mom and dad. Well, why are we taking the car, mom and dad? We can walk, we can take the bike, and really sort of maybe using kids to do our dirty work. But it's I think there's a lot of opportunities we have, and I just am really enjoying putting more and more stuff on the ground for everybody to use and get out and move through our community in a happy, healthy, exciting way. So.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Jamie. Gives me a very positive outlook on what is going to be done in the next months and years. And so I'm just thinking that, Sam, do you think we have enough time for a poll, or for the two polls? Those will take a couple minutes.
We've lost quite a few folks already.
Yeah. So I think we're going to close it up at this point. I just want to again thank our panel for being here and giving their all for their answers to the questions that we've posed. In a few days, we'll send out an email with the recording of this event and the summary of some of the ideas and any links that we have put into the chat. I would like to express my appreciation to our panel again, Jamie Rose, Colin Stein, and Erin Hemmons. Thank you so much for your contributions. Also to the people with the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub who helped with this presentation, and all the people who are participating for your time and your contributions. And so again, I look forward to being together again soon, and to further develop our capacity to act to build a robust, safe, and exciting cycling future. So good night to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.